Hi, Sue Borison here from Your Teen Media, and today I'm with Dr. Michele Borba, a globally recognized educational psychologist and parenting, bullying, and character expert, and the author of Unselfie. So thank you for doing this with me. We are, as everyone knows, in our homes, because that's where we all are right now.
Yes.
And so the thing that we're going to talk about today, the overarching topic is going to be empathy. Let's start with, you've also done a lot of talking to teenagers right now. So let's start with, what were the 4 most concerning things that kids brought up when you spoke with them?
Well, number one is for some kids, it was fretting about their families. They were really worried about economic situations. Kids are across the board, but not only the economics of dad's job, mom's job, but also just the stress. Are mom and dad going to get sick? Which is lightly so. That's empathy 101. Connection. They all said that they were so worried because friends play an enormous part of a teen's life. But here's this point in their life where they need to be with others and they can't because of social distancing. Stress. They said they were already stressed before. Now it's just doubling because of their concerns. And future. Where's it going? What's going to happen to me? Particularly seniors. I think they're in a very, very watershed moment of wondering, hey, I put all my life and soul into that college application, or going off, should I leave, is a big question some of them are asking.
What are the silver linings that they're talking about?
The silver linings that they're saying is, first of all, for some of them, not all, but it was the time to reconnect with parents. They really did appreciate that. Once the downward slide of the fear went down, because they were so worried, it was, some of them were talking about just playing games, getting out the old, Monopoly games and shooting ladders and all of those. They said they hadn't done for such a while, that was really fun. The other silver lining is some of them are actually doing things that they didn't have a chance to do before. Reading for pleasure was at the top of many of their lists. Said we never had a chance to do that. They're finding creative ways to fill that connection so that they do connect.
They are, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of creativity right now. That is really a silver lining.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this high school generation of kids and college generation of kids as the most stressed generation.
Yeah.
And it before COVID, it was in the news all the time. So what do we worry about right now as parents, and how do we bring some mental health to this generation right now?
We should worry. I don't think we're going to be thinking that when we open the door, it's going to be like pixie dust and all is going to be well. If it isn't this pandemic, it's going to be something else. So if there's any moment that is a whoa, wake up call, is our kids need coping skills. It's going to be a very, very stressful life for them the rest of their lives. Are we teaching them coping skills? When I ask kids, so what are ways that you cope? Many of them said, we've been taught stuff. We had health units, but they said they never sustained it for us. It never became a habit. And you don't learn stress reducers by reading about it in a textbook, quote unquote, said the teen. So then I say, well, what helps you? And that's the other thing they say. It's different for every kid. So don't go throwing that mindfulness on us, because for some kids that works. Yoga works for other kids. We have to figure out what works. And they actually have a list that's really good. It's a great conversation for your kid. First is identifying your own stress signs. So before it builds, stress is normal. Don't let it get into the overwhelmed level. Maybe you can take a moment as a family and figure out what every stress sign is for each other. They usually know yours. Mom, this is what you do, but they don't know their own. So we can help them do that one. Then the second thing is start brainstorming. Many times it's boys, and I hate to be gender-based, but boys say that exercise really helps. So too girls with the yoga. So maybe it's doing that with them together. Other ideas for teens always say it's loading their playlist with music. Girls say a lot of times it's journaling, writing it through to work it through, or finding somebody on Facebook that they can connect with. The bottom line is it's going to be different for every child. Every teen's going to react differently, but they need to figure out a coping strategy. Then keep doing it without you reminding them.
Okay, so I want to go back to the first idea, which is that we all recognize other people's moments of stress before we do ourselves. So I could just picture that in my family and how poorly that would go over when we point out to each other what those stressors are, because of, yes, you're right, we do all know it for each other. So how can we have that conversation without it actually feeling like an assault, and instead feeling like a chance for everyone to kind of bolster their own resilience.
I think it's how we frame it. We don't frame it by, gee, you always get angry when you do this, because that's going to go nowhere. But if we reframe it as we're all going to be going through stress, and one of the ways we can be able to stay healthy is recognize our own signs. Maybe the first thing is don't point out each other's, but just be more aware of yours. But let them know what stress signs look like, because they may be looking things. There's physical ones and there's emotional ones. So physical ones maybe, are you losing sleep? Are you feeling like your heart's fluttering? Are you feeling like your face is getting flustered? Or you just really feel that all of a sudden you kind of get lightheaded? Every kid's going to be different, but those are a few. It's not maybe a one-time conversation. It's several conversations. What some parents do is actually have the kid be the go for and look it up online to see if you can find those signs. Another one would be emotional signs, the irritability, the trouble focusing and concentrating, which is happening to us all. That's a stress sign. Could be all different kinds. The anger sign, the irritability or quick to unable to focus, are other ones that kick in. Once we know them, then we can be aware of them. We can even make a moment to say, tune into them, be aware of them, and just even make a note to yourself, because it sure helps in that push comes to shove to be able to say, I need to take a time out.
Do you know families that have reported back to you that they've done this and it's worked well?
Yeah, but it was a reframing where they really sat down in a calm moment. Many families said the worst thing they did was in the heat of the moment where everybody was having their exorcism moment. So now we got to identify our stress signs. Mm-hmm. But it was a calm down moment when the kids bought into it. Because then what they said is when we look like we're about ready to have that blow up moment, let's create a signal for ourselves. And that means we need each other's to space. And for some, it could be nothing more than an umpire signal. For others, it could be, touching your nose. It doesn't make any difference what the signal is. But once everybody knew their signal, what they did is they started to own it and just say this, no words, because as soon as you do the words, then the fight goes in. And that just means I need a couple of seconds or, a half an hour to walk away, get myself calm, and then let's come down and think. That is what parents said changed the dynamics in the house.
Wow, that's amazing. I would love to hear from one of those parents who did it successfully.
Yeah, it isn't a one-time thing. It's a buy-in where your kids come up with a signal, or what do we need? The fascinating thing was one mom tried it. The best report was, it was a 2-day workshop I was at. She came back the following day and said, you won't believe what happened. I said, what would happen? She said, it didn't work at the beginning, so I decided what to do because my kid was the verbal abuser. I just kept the signal, but I got myself a supply of water and great magazines and locked myself in the bathroom. And what I did was let him know that we're not going to abuse each other. We're going to be respectful to one another. Until when I came out, he finally said, what workshop did you go to, Mom? She said, oh, it's absolutely amazing. It changed the whole dynamic. But she says, I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep going with this because this is what we need to do, is keep our relationship intact.
That's great. I love that. You talk a lot about empathy. So tell us what empathy means. What is there a universal term, or do we all just kind of have a sense of what it means?
Yeah, we don't have a sense of what it is. It's really feeling with another person. Sympathy is I feel for you, but empathy is I'm feeling together with you. Now, there's also really important for a parent of a teen to know there's 3 kinds. Some of our kids have that affective sign. And, you remember them even when they were little and watching Bambi and they were a basket case because you could see it. They were just sobbing, or their friend is bullied at school and they come up just so upset. It's affect. You can read it on them. But other kids who may not have that affective side have a cognitive side. And that's a wonderful point of view. It's perspective taking. They're a little more serious, but you can see them try to stop and think where the other person is coming from. That's what we really want. Number one, right now, that's the top employability factor we have in the world. 20% of Fortune 500 companies say employees that they just hired don't have that capability. So that's what we really need, particularly for the teen. You don't have to agree with what the person is saying, but try to understand where he's coming from. The third one that I'm seeing a lot of teens are doing brilliantly right now is the compassion and action point. where they're seeing it or they're feeling it and they're understanding it, but they're doing something about it. And that is what is golden, because we do know that when you walk on that empathy, it actually reduces your stress. And you'll notice that how we're getting through this whole virus and pandemic is strong together. When we're together is how we're going to rebound. And kids are the ones who are coming up with fabulous ideas to do so.
So, do you as a human being have to have a certain amount of like feeling good about yourself, feeling good about your situation before you can have empathy?
Well, here's the piece that's a great question. When stress builds, we do know that empathy can dial down because you're in survival mode. So you may feel it, but the problem is when you're so stressed out and overwhelmed like we are right now, or fearful, you dial it down. One of the things we're trying to do for kids is saying, put your fear into action. It'll actually help you more because it'll reduce your stress, build your confidence, and you'll be able to connect with others. When I say, what are ways that you're seeing friends do it? The kids told me one girl has created quarantine bags. I said, what's a quarantine bag? She says, they're nothing more than just these 5-cent, just, little baggies that mommy used to put in our lunch when we went to school. But what I'm doing is putting a little note in it that's a handwritten note, but maybe a gum and a sticker, and I'm dropping them off on like a driveway drop off. She said, you know what? All of my friends are feeling so happy because of that, because you can't believe how much it makes me feel good. I'm happy as a result of it. So that would be one idea. Some kids are saying that they realize their friends were really stressed before all this happened. Now they worry about them because they're at home in a situation that they know is stressful. So what they decided to do is just create little inspirational text chains. It doesn't have to be some highfalutin quote, but it's just a little, how you doing? We're thinking about you. And the response of the kids who are receiving that is just absolutely unbelievable. But so too is the kid who's sending it. So it's
I'm,
trying to find what empowers your kid. That's what you were trying to do, not suggesting try this, but what do you think could work for you?
I love all those stories. I mean, I think we're all so like fueled by these stories of kindness. But then there's another side to that story when our kids aren't doing it, either because they're depressed or anxious or whatever else themselves.
Yeah,
And that leads to kind of a little bit of the Facebook feeling like everybody else is doing something grand
yeah.
except my kids. So, what if you're a parent of a kid who is showing no signs of, maybe it might not be as big as empathy, but of doing those acts of kindness? What do we do we push our kids to do it? Do we just recognize this isn't the moment?
I think the first thing is this isn't the moment, because you dig a little deeper and you use empathy yourself. What's fueling the dimming down? And usually what's fueling the dimming down is fear, depression, or stress. And you may be deal with something else. And that is help that child from where they are, because empathy is the best tool you have right now. The second thing is, the best ideas I've ever seen on everything we're talking about here aren't fueled by the parent. They're fueled by the kid. It could be the parent brainstorming. God, the neighbor next door looks so upset because she knows that her husband is in the hospital right now. What you're doing is you're pointing out the moment, and then you're maybe coming up as a family. You think there's anything we could do for her. And many times it's the kid who's the one who steps up to the plate, not copying our idea, but coming up with what works for them. And those are always the moments that are so far better than let's do this.
Yeah, but it's so challenging because I've always found that with my kids, any suggestion for me is an eye roll. But
Yeah,
if I like,
yeah.
they'll do their own thing. But it's like I kind of want to drive the kindness. But you have to sit back and everyone has to find their own way.
I think you're right on that one, because what we've discovered is empathy is always self-driven. Otherwise, you're just doing the helicopter parenting of now let's all be kind. And what happens is it loses the meaning and the impact because the kid doesn't see it genuinely coming from him, but from you. But I've seen more and more kids stepping up to the plate because they see somebody else being stressed and they come up with, here's the other thing. In this epidemic we're also looking at is one of the things about today's teens. They're the first generation who's also reading the news. they're reading dismal news because it's coming through here. That also dims your empathy down. So it's maybe flipping it over and starting to subtly pointing out, did you hear about the good stuff? Or watching just Lester Holt, I'm just going to mention that one because at the very end of the show, he always does a little 3 minutes of here's some good stuff that's happening in the world. That fuels a lot of kids to inspire them. All the kids that I've ever seen, even when I was writing Unselfie, I interviewed 500 who teachers said that's a really altruistic child. So I always came up with, how'd you get that way? And it was always driven by their own moment when they saw something that they said wasn't right, and it was fueled that way as opposed to the parent driving them.
Yeah, that's a tough lesson, but it is really a good one to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's end on something positive. Tell us like the thing that made you so happy when you talked to all these kids.
The thing that made me so happy is that we have seen these kids or portrayed them as self-centered, self-absorbed. But what I find is that it was actually the opposite. When kids really are called to pull up from the inside out and put it on their own, they're the ones who are stepping up to the plate. And very often what I saw, it was the kid leading the parent. Mom, we got to do something for that neighbor next door. Mom, my friend is really hurting and we got to do something for her. And it was the child driving the parent. I loved it. When the parent said, okay, let's go, it was a, oh, aha moment, because we know that there's hope. This is the generation who's going to lead us, and we've got to keep following them as opposed to at this point, what we've been doing before, pulling them, step back, let them show us the way, because it's going to be inspiring.
Dr. Michele Borba, thank you so much for your time.
You are so welcome.